waiting for everybody to be here, and then I didn't hit record. Sorry.
No worries.
Greg, I think your point is really important.
Yeah.
But that's why that spreadsheet needs to be as detailed as possible and able to add up numbers and monuments and things like that. That's number one priority, and Ryan is available to help you with get that done.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can do genealogy work for the rest of time.
Yeah.
But getting the spreadsheet ready is like the number one thing we need to do, because your question needs factual numbers, and it needs, we need to really have Maria's understanding of that we're making reasonable assumption about where, instead of just trying to assign 5,800 burials that don't have a family lot to this one area.
Yeah.
So it's a very accurate question. Is we need to have a number to speculate on first, right? So that's kind of, we don't want to put the cart before the horse, and we want to ask that question when it's time to ask that question.
I have a question. Do we have any sense of how many markers are in other parts of the cemetery that are approximately that size?
There are about 15,000 monuments total for about 23,000 burials. There are definitely quite a few family lots that have no markers at all, or have some markers, but that the burial lot records are full. Did I answer your question? Because I'm not sure I did.
Not really. So for the size of the colored grounds, let's take any part of the cemetery. About how many markers would you say would be in a size that's in an area that's approximately the same size?
I guess you could look at, Jennifer, you could probably look at like one of the grids, one of the lots that are in kind of the grid area where we know the dimensions.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm asking.
Roughly the number of people are in that space, as far as single burials. I mean, that might be one way to estimate.
I think it's a good way to estimate, but even just very simply, a very simple point of comparison, not only for ourselves, but for the public, to say, the colored grounds is this size, but these are how many known burials or markers, I should say, are there. And we know that there are more people and they're missing because in this other part of the cemetery that's the same size, we have X amount of markers. So I think, that's just a very simple way to also just introduce this, but also give us an idea of how we might think about visualizing.
Well, a typical family lot is 25 by 30, but that would allow a little bit of space for curbing and then a few feet in between, like a pathway around the outside. And that doesn't exist here, even if there are some curbing in some areas. There's not a lot. There are a few monuments with curbing in this section, not in this picture.
And most of the curbing, most of the curbing for those family lots, I know, like for the Lovingood lot, I know my family bought it sometime in the probably around 1910. And so you do have a lot of later burials that, that don't kind of account to the majority of the records that are prior to 1900. So it's hard to I guess, estimate how things were bought, who, where they bought it from, and kind of what was the overall kind of planning in the early 1900s, because that's all of that data that we don't have, all the maps or plans that we don't have, unfortunately. But obviously that would explain a lot if you did,
So in the Google Drive, this presentation needs for an interpretive plan for Oakwood Cemetery has some of these photos and pulling out some of the language we used in the All Together Here exhibit. And then the needs we have for how I know that this modeling project isn't the interpretive plan, but this is where a lot of this bit is summarized. And here are those links. Okay, I can also send them to you as an email, but that's in addition to the 3D model that we're going to create. We are planning on putting some interpretive panels that this is not done and approved yet, but as a way of having a physical way of having some of those photos or interpretive ideas and the burial numbers per section and an idea of where those sections are, if that helps where some of this is going. It will definitely live in the world digitally, but we also are making a plan to have it be on site. But this document in Drive is where to find some of those already summarized. Do you want to talk more about this, of the review of burials and the map of the cemetery areas and creating a summary of burial data? Okay. When we applied for the grant, this is also in the Google Drive. Here's this, we can, or you can organize it. We have the application documents includes this appendices. And this is what we've turned in with the grant project as examples of what we've done so far and a few other outside examples of things. And then I will also put together a presentation version for a future meeting of types of 3D modeling examples, some from here and some new ones that we've come across. And then one of the things we have done is design GIS database, a geospatial database where all this information will live. And some of that we're just collecting from information we find in genealogy records, as well as ancestry.com and family trees and military records, death certificates, all of those things, information about the monument, if there is a monument, what's on it, any symbols, any particular shapes, and the condition of the monuments. And then we're also pushing to collect more information once this project is released, and that will live in the geospatial database. So we've already been working on the design for that database for 2 years. So we've been like talking about this for a very long time internally because we want to really get it right. And it will be public facing once, hopefully this project launches. And then we'll also use it to further in the future create the geospatial database for the rest of the cemetery as well. Do you have any interest in looking at the fields we're putting in our geospatial database, or are you good with the bigger picture, theoretical and historical context? Okay. Just assuring you, we have spent a lot of time kicking that around. We did 3 different community engagement meetings last winter also to try and get feedback from the public about that too. And Deanna sat in on one of those. So she's already heard my information about that. There are some other things we need to go over in the future, or we can chisel off some of those today. But before I keep going on that, do you have what you need to get started now? Yes. Okay.
Jennifer, one question. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure on this agenda,
Mhm.
where you've got divide task between team for review,
Uh-huh.
that you've divided the task for those 4 things. From what I understand, I'm looking at the map of cemetery areas, records of burials, and that SAC report in particular. So I put myself in there for that.
Yeah, oops, sorry, gotta figure out how to do this and will it let me edit it? No. Okay, so the first one is Maria, to create the summary of burial data. That is looking at the spreadsheets and making sure our tally of numbers correlates with those map areas. Maria, I think that is you also. Am I correct? Or you're on mute.
Sorry,
Sorry.
looking at Greg's spreadsheet
Uh-huh.
and making sure that it tallies with what now?
Making sure we are only looking at the tabs of data that fit within the section we're looking at.
Okay, so that's more of a clerical thing. I just want to make sure because it's like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be comparing it to identify, how am I supposed to identify errors?
Right. I think if you help us review the Save Austin Cemetery location data and that map that's in that dashboard that I showed you earlier, the way we've got it labeled there, then you're just confirming with us the sections we're reviewing for this project. And then we leave off as a clerical thing, all the tabs in the spreadsheet that we are not reviewing for this project.
So it sounds like I should probably extract the ones that don't have any relevance, just to not cause any confusion.
That would be really, really good because.
Yeah,
then it'd
because
be like thinking
I won't
have-
delete them. I won't delete them, but I'll at least try to extract them so
Right.
that they're, yeah.
So Greg, that's why I've been asking you to work with Ryan on this, because he's in charge of the database records. And that's why we're not deleting anything. We're making sure it all lives in one place and not making extra copies of things. So Maria, we will let you know once that has been done. Hopefully soon, this weekish, next weekish, so that we can make sure that we're not giving you too much information to review.
Especially stuff that's not relevant to this project. So, yeah.
Yes.
Great. And then that review background information for project, the GIS database design, we just agreed that we're all happy with whatever you guys been working on for the past 2 years.
Yeah, I think you just agreed to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then for Deanna and Tara, they're going to consider, they're going to review the background information for the project and think about the maps and how we look at the space so that we can start to do some overlays and conjecture on land use over time. And I will make sure that we have, there are maps we have of how the land was annexed over different decades that we already have. So that I think is even in some of our digital mapping already. And I'll make sure you have the right links for that. Then once we kind of have had that kind of all on the same page to review all that, then we need to start doing that conjecturing about how many spaces are in what actual area so that we can do some digital renderings on top of photos and on top of maps for that. So that'll be a future topic once we've kind of reviewed that. And then Maria, you said the Freedman's Monument, as if that is at the top of my mind. I can't take notes that quickly. Can you send me what that is?
Sorry, it wasn't the monument that's the monuments that are installed there. It was basically you were trying to look for period representations of how different populations might have put their loved ones to rest. In the Freedman Cemetery, they made the mistake of raising over all of those cemeteries without realizing that Black people actually leave stuff on top of the cemeteries and that stuff is not garbage. So a lot of that stuff is in boxes. However, when they dug down into one of the grave shafts, they found one casket, the remains of it, that had shells on top of it, which is clearly significant.
Yeah, if you have
And
any,
so there's a photo of it, and I probably have an image of it somewhere. I could just send it to you, but I'm just thinking that might help because it's the same period.
yeah,
That cemetery opened in 1869. I mean, it's a 19th century, last quarter of the 19th century cemetery. And so that is a really good archaeological example of what some of these resting places might have looked, what some of these burials might have looked like, and in a Black context anyway.
got it. Then once you've all had time to kind of digest what we've done to date and kind of give us some parameters for yes, but, or yes, and, then you're going to make some recommendations on what kind of further research we can do internally, or what we would do if we got more funding in the future that we could pay for more of your time. One of the other details that we talked about last meeting is making sure we have the kind of 4 to 5 general questions for the focus group meetings, for the small groups with the public. And so if you haven't had time to review that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sorry, could you say that last bit about, I was just actually typing some notes on what you just
Sure.
said something.
Would you like me to send an email that kind of summarizes?
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'll also put it in our meeting notes ongoing document as well. And apologies that I forgot to record the first part of this meeting, which I will forever regret. Sorry. I'm not a good multitasker. So if you see me forgetting to do something, please point it out. Okay. I need to get Laura Cortez some information on what's going to go in our presentation, and she's going to help with that. And then I have a 1-pager that I have 90% done. Well, I would think it's all the way done, but we keep trying to get the language just right. So I meant to email it to you before this meeting, but I was waiting to hear back from Laura. So this is what the 1-pager is looking like right now. And it's getting everybody's bios short as possible, and the least amount of text to kind of explain the project that Parks and Rec can use at public events, and we can hand out to people as it goes. This, we will also then in the future add a link to sign up for the small group meetings, because this will also then get emailed to our participants. So we didn't want to put the sign up for the meetings out to the public because we are not inviting the whole public to our meetings. We're trying to make sure that we're only getting primarily descendants and the subject matter experts and community members we've identified. So I've got to get all the PARD logos and such on there. I've got I'll send this to you for approval by email, but otherwise it's ready to go. And we did update the website, but it needs a little bit of tweaking. So, but there is something live on the website, and I'll put this there as a downloadable PDF as well. Do you need anything else from me at the moment besides a better summary of what is on your list?
Where are the focus group questions? You mentioned 5 questions.
Yeah, they are. All right, screen share screen. They are in the community
Gotcha.
group questions.
My eyes just totally glossed over that. Thank you.
All right. So I'll put notes in the Google Drive and I'll send you an email that includes links, even though you have access to it, just so it's a little more organized, and kind of write out what each of you are doing. Does that make sense? And then Deanna, for one of the things we'd really like your help with is we have a list of people buried in what they labeled as Mexican grounds within those sections. And we published a lot of those in our digital project, Communar. And we did a project where we read aloud the names of all the people buried in the whole cemetery, not just this section with Hispanic names. And then Alan Garcia, who reviewed that list, and there are a lot of misspellings. Both in the original records and then in multiple data transcription and errors. And so we would love for you have some of your help kind of looking at that list of names. It is not 2,700 names long, but it's a little longish, but it's already in a spreadsheet format, and review Alan's notes to make sure we want, even if it's a misspelling, for there to be a notes field with the other possible spellings, because like the name Gutierrez can be spelled many different ways, and we want the fields to be searchable. So that way we would have what we think was in the original records plus all the possible name spellings in another field, but within that record, so that people could still find it if they're searching there for their ancestors.
Okay, I can do that.
Great. So I'll send you some of that information.
Jennifer, what I can say right now is this looks fine. I mean, I think that what storyline should we be telling is somewhat a big overlap with what are the stories that the community feels are absent that need to be told. So maybe you can put what are the stories that the community feels are absent as a first question.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the next question should be, what storyline should we be telling, based on what folks have said, what storyline should we be telling? Or you can keep both of those in, because sometimes it's nice to ask the same question twice because you want to be sure that it gets answered.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes one strategy for oral histories is to ask the same question in a different format. So I'm just raising this so that you can decide what you think you should be. So you could leave that in if you're thinking this is really, really important. So let's keep this in there and make sure that it's something that gets addressed.
This is not my area of expertise. This is really for you three and Laura to draft, so that you're really getting the answers that inform you, so that you can instruct us on what to do.
And it's a hour and a half, right? And so you're going to start with a short presentation that will take 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to introduce ourselves?
You may.
I mean, we probably want at least the descendants to introduce themselves, the stakeholders and those folks present, right? So it could take 10 to 15 minutes to actually get to, so we basically have like an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah. And those of us that are staff members are not talking.
Okay. So me, Tara, and Deanna and Laura will be there asking questions.
Laura's in charge of facilitating the meetings, and
so she's going to run the questions. Okay. I just want to make sure that, because I agree with Laura where she's saying, you don't want to have too many questions, because it's like with 7 people, 5 to 7 people there in just over an hour, if you want input from everybody, 5 or 6 questions is, you're probably not even, you really want to make sure that you got the big 3 up front.
Right. And I talked to one descendant this week who her cousin is coming in for an oral history interview on Wednesday. And her cousin was very excited. But the woman I talked to was like, yeah, I'm the one who did all the genealogy in our family, and I've got all the records and the photos, but I do not trust the city at all. No. And I told her how much I appreciated her honesty and her time telling me that, and that she could keep telling me that as much as she wanted to, I was just as open to being present for her criticism as she wanted. So we don't have the trust of our community. We really don't. And we know that. So you might think or decide that Greg, as a descendant representative and staff member, should be at these meetings and that I should just be watching the recordings later. I'm open to that too. I'm not trying to be controlling. I'm trying to really make sure people feel heard.
Yeah.
And that they're feeling heard by you all and acknowledged and treated well, because we have ongoing issues with descendants who we're trying to get to participate in this issue who are not happy with us, and they have every right to not be happy with us.
Well, my feeling is, Jennifer, I think you should be there. This is my opinion, but I think you should be there because you all need to be doing the work of making sure that people, if you want people to gain people's trust, you have to put in the effort. So I would say you should be there.
Okay.
That's my opinion. The last thing I have is, do you know where people are buried without headstones at the cemetery? If you get a yes on that, there's not going to be any way for anybody really, if it's a virtual meeting, to point out where that is. So I'm not if you're planning on doing an individual follow-up with that person, would I ask that question? And I mean, which I think is an important question, but I would definitely keep it last and then just ask that person if it's okay that we follow up by calling them.
Yeah.
Rather than trying them, you know what I'm saying? Otherwise you're going to get into this. Well, if you walk in through the gate and the chapel is and you don't, it's like, that is going to be like,
yeah.
So
these are drafts. This is really for you all to author. This is a starting place.
It looks good to me.
So if you want to take that question out and we use that in an oral history question, that's totally appropriate. I'm not trying to tell you what the content should be. I'm trying to just get the ball rolling.
That was going to be my recommendation, that the last question be in an oral history interview, especially if you have that person on site and could potentially take you out to that location.
Absolutely.
In the grounds. That would be extremely helpful.
Yeah.
And just for brevities, and I totally agree with Maria that sometimes when you ask the same question, but you reframe it. And so maybe at the beginning, we might just combine the first two questions, which are really asking the same thing, but towards the end, as we're wrapping up maybe and concluding, if that could be reframed or represented maybe in a concluding way that might capture something that came out in the conversation, perhaps. And so that might be a way to approach these questions. But other than that, I also think these are good questions. And if there are some other themes maybe that we can think of just briefly to just help trigger people's, thinking about the third question on here, what is going to be important to emphasize Black achievement, family histories, and if we could think maybe of a couple of other themes just to kind of get the conversation moving. And
role
also
of the
to make
church,
sure,
for example. Role of the church or the mortuary practices that their churches used on a regular basis.
burial practices, like some of
Correct.
the traditions, that we don't see, and
Right.
that we're trying to get at and learn about. So those kinds of things.
Right.
And then just, we, in this project, state the project explicitly, because especially with something with so much history involved, we don't want people to go on a tangent. And so, in the same way that we're calling for descendants and all the descendants, are contacting. So just, even in phrasing the question in this, blah, blah, blah project, and you're saying specifically, what the project is, the subject, the title of the project.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really important for the moderator to do a good job moderating. And you just kind of like at the beginning, basically say, we would like to hear, get responses from everyone who's at the table here, that, all of our guests.
She's really good at that. I've been in
just to make
groups
sure
with her.
that we're not hearing from three people who talk for half an hour. I'll take a stab at trying to reflect some of what Tara was saying in this document.
Great.
Okay, all right.
Thank you for your time today, and I will follow up with notes in an email.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Right.
Thanks all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week. Happy Valentine's.
Yeah,
too.
happy Valentine's. Bye-bye.
Bye.